Somewhere in the lease you signed, there's a line that doesn't mean a thing. You read it, or let's be honest, you didn't, you signed anyway. And if that line ever landed in front of a judge, it would get tossed straight out. Because there are a few things a landlord simply cannot make you give up, no matter what's printed on page 4. Most people have no idea. They think the lease is a rulebook, whatever it says goes. So the day the landlord changes the locks or keeps the entire deposit or won't fix the heat in the middle of January, they look at that thick stack of paper sitting in a drawer somewhere and they think, well, I signed this, must be legal. It usually isn't. 6 things your landlord cannot legally do to you. And the part that still gets me after watching this play out over and over is that 5 of them stay illegal, even if your lease says the exact opposite. Even if you signed every page, even if you meant it. So which line in your lease is the one that doesn't count? And what happens the day your landlord finally realizes you know the difference? Start with the lock, because that's the one people feel in their chest before they understand it in their head. You come home, your key doesn't turn, there's a new deadbolt, maybe a padlock, maybe a note taped to the door telling you to call a number. The power's off, not the whole building, just your unit. And your first thought standing there with a bag of groceries getting warm against your leg is that you've been kicked out, that it's over, that whatever the landlord just did, he must have had the right to do it because who changes a lock if they're not allowed to? Here's what's actually going on. In nearly every state in this country, your landlord cannot remove you from your home by himself. Not by changing the locks, not by shutting off your water or your heat or your electricity, not by taking the front door off its hinges. And yes, people really do that. Not by hauling your stuff to the curb. None of it. There's a word for all of those moves, and the word is illegal. Lawyers call it a self-help eviction, which is a strange little phrase when you sit with it because there's nothing helpful about it, and the landlord is not allowed to help himself to anything. The only way a landlord can make you leave is to take you to court. He files a case, you get served with papers, you get a date, a judge hears it, and if the landlord wins, it's still not the landlord who removes you. It's the sheriff or the marshal holding a piece of paper called a writ of possession, and that's the only person on earth with the authority to put you out of that home. Your landlord, no matter how angry he is, no matter how far you are behind, does not get to skip that line. And the lease can't change it. I want to be clear about that because it's the whole spine of this thing. A landlord can put whatever he wants in a lease. Tenant agrees landlord may re-enter and take possession upon default. Fancy words, looks official. Doesn't matter. You cannot sign away your right to the court process. It isn't yours to give up. The state put that process there on purpose, and a contract can't delete it. I had a hard time believing how far this protection goes the first time I really dug into it. In some states, if your landlord illegally locks you out, you can call a locksmith and get back into your own home, and it is not breaking and entering because legally, that's still your place. The lease handed you the right to live there, and only a judge can hand it back. Now, I'd be careful with that because the details change depending on where you are, and you do not want to be the test case standing on your own porch arguing law with a police officer at 10 at night. But the principle holds. The landlord changing the locks doesn't end your tenancy. A court does. And the cost of getting this wrong for the landlord is real. This isn't a slap on the wrist. In California, a tenant who gets illegally locked out can take the landlord to court and the judge can order the landlord to pay up to $100 a day for every single day that person was shut out. Other states stack on damages, attorney's fees, sometimes criminal charges. In New York, an unlawful eviction can be a misdemeanor. The landlord, not the tenant, ends up in front of the prosecutor. So why do landlords still do it? That's the part I find almost funny in a dark way. They do it because it works on people who don't know better. The whole move depends on you believing the lie, that the lock is the law. The second you know it isn't, the entire thing falls apart, and a lot of landlords fold the moment a tenant says the words, "That's an illegal lockout and I'm calling the police." Which brings me to something I'll just say plainly, even though it cuts against the polite advice you'll hear on a lot of these channels. The standard line is document everything, send a certified letter, keep records. Fine, do that, but in the heat of an actual lockout with your stuff inside and the temperature dropping, the certified letter advice is almost insulting. The thing that actually moves the needle in that exact moment is the police and the word lockout. Because most officers, once they hear it framed right, will tell the landlord to let you back in and keep the peace. The paper trail matters later in court. It does nothing for you on the sidewalk tonight. Now, the lockout is the loud one. It's the one with the padlock and the cold groceries and the racing heart. But it's not the one that costs most people the most money quietly, year after year, with no drama at all. That one's smaller, it's slower, it hides inside something most renters think of as nothing more than an annoyance, a broken heater the landlord keeps ignoring. And what that broken heater turns into, the moment you understand what the law actually says about it, is something almost nobody realizes they're holding. Because here's the second thing he can't do, and it lives inside that ignored maintenance request like a coin nobody bothered to pick up. Every place you rent comes with a promise. You won't find it in the lease, the landlord didn't write it, didn't sign it, probably wishes it weren't there anyway, but it's baked into the deal the second you get the keys. The promise is this: the home has to be fit to live in. Lawyers call it the implied warranty of habitability, which is a mouthful, so just hear it as the livable home rule. Heat that works, hot water, plumbing that drains, a roof that keeps the rain out, no rats, no black mold creeping up the bathroom wall, no exposed wiring. The basics that make a place a home instead of a box with a door. And the landlord owes you that even if your lease says he doesn't. This is the one I want you to really sit with because it's the cleanest example of the whole idea behind this video. Some landlords slip a line into the lease. Tenant accepts the unit as is, landlord has no duty to make repairs. Looks airtight, you signed it. In most states, that sentence is worth exactly nothing. A court will read it and set it right back down because you cannot waive the livable home rule. It isn't a feature you negotiated. It's the floor underneath the whole contract, and the contract can't dig below its own floor. Where did this even come from? Because it wasn't always the law. For centuries, it was the opposite. Renting used to work like buying a used car. You took the place exactly as it sat, cockroaches and all, and once you had the keys, the landlord could wash his hands of it. Then 1970, a building in Washington, D.C., Clifton Terrace, where the tenants were living under more than 1,000 housing code violations. 1,000. They stopped paying rent, the landlord moved to evict them, and a federal appeals court looked at the whole rotten arrangement and said, no, a lease isn't a land sale. It's a deal for a place to live, and if the place isn't livable, the landlord hasn't held up his end. That case, Javins, if you ever want to look it up, is the reason the livable home rule exists, and some version of it now runs through nearly every state in the country. So what does that actually hand you, the person with the heater that's been dead since the cold snap? It flips the thing people get backwards. Most renters believe rent is a one-way street. You owe it, full stop, and repairs are a favor the landlord might do if he's in a good mood. The law sees it the other way. Your rent and his repairs are tied together. He's not keeping the place livable, then in a lot of states, your duty to pay full rent starts to wobble. And that's not you being a deadbeat, that's the deal working the way it was built to work. Now I have to slow down right here because this is exactly the spot where a confident little video can get someone hurt. The fact that the law is on your side does not mean you get to stop paying rent and feel clever about it. The remedies, withholding rent, paying for the repair yourself, and taking it off to rent, breaking the lease, getting some of your rent knocked down, they exist, but each state runs them through its own narrow set of rules. And if you withhold rent the wrong way, you hand your landlord a clean, legitimate reason to evict you. The protection turns into the trap. So the honest version is the leverage is real, and that is also a procedure, not a feeling. People who get this right usually put the request in writing first, give the landlord a real chance to fix it, and call the city's code enforcement office when he doesn't. And that inspector knocking on the door tends to do more than any angry phone call ever will. And the moment you make that call, you've quietly stepped onto the third thing he can't do, even though it feels like the most natural thing in the world for him to want to. Punish you for it. You reported the mold, you asked in writing for the heat to get fixed, and 3 weeks later the rent jumps $200, or a notice shows up saying your month-to-month is over, or suddenly there's a complaint about a lease violation nobody mentioned before. That's retaliation, and in most states it's against the law. Your landlord can't hit back at you for standing up for a right you actually have. The law in a lot of places even does something clever to help you prove it, because retaliation is slippery. No landlord is dumb enough to write, "I'm raising your rent because you called the inspector." So the rules build in a presumption. In California, it's 180 days. In Texas, it's 6 months. The window's different state to state, but the idea is the same. If the landlord comes after you within that stretch of time after you exercised a right, the law assumes he did it on purpose, and now he's the one who has to stand in front of a judge and prove he had some other clean reason. The weight shifts onto him. them. That's rare and it matters. I had to read that twice the first time I read it, honestly, because it sounded too good, the burden flipping onto the landlord like that. But it's real, and it's sitting in statute in state after state. It's not bulletproof, and I won't pretend it is. The landlord can still evict you for the ordinary stuff. You genuinely didn't pay. You genuinely trashed the place. The lease genuinely ended for a real reason. Retaliation protection isn't a shield against everything. It's a shield against being punished for speaking up. Those are different, and the difference is where these cases get fought. So that's 3. The lockout he can't do. The repairs he can't dodge or make you sign away. The payback he can't take for you knowing the first 2. And the heater's still cold while you're standing there deciding whether you're the kind of person who makes the call. That's really what all of this comes down to in the end. Not the statutes, not the case names, just whether you pick up the phone before the 30-day notice shows up or after. I still don't fully understand why none of this gets taught anywhere. Not in school, not when you sign your first lease, not once in the whole process of becoming someone who rents a home. You're just handed the thick stack of paper and trusted to know which lines are real. Now you know at least 3 of them aren't. I should be straight with you about the math on that. I told you 6. I've walked you through 3. The lockout, the repairs, the payback. The other 3 are real and they matter. So let me hand them to you plainly the way I'd want them handed to me. And then I want to talk about the only thing that actually changes anything here. 4 is your security deposit. When you move out, your landlord doesn't get to just keep it because he feels like it or because the carpet looks a little tired. Nearly every state puts him on a clock, usually somewhere between 14 and 30 days, to either send your money back or send you an itemized list of what he kept and why. Not cleaning and damages, an actual list. And he can only deduct for real damage beyond normal wear and tear or rent you genuinely didn't pay. Faded paint, a worn spot in the carpet, the ordinary ghost of someone having lived there, that's not damage, that's life, and he eats that cost, not you. Missed the deadline in a lot of states, and he doesn't just owe you your deposit back. He can owe you 2 or 3 times the amount on top of it. In Texas, that's 3 times the part he wrongfully kept, plus fees. 5, he can't slam the door on you because of who you are. There's a federal law, the Fair Housing Act. It covers the whole country, every state. And it says a landlord can't refuse to rent to you or treat you worse once you're in because of your race, your color, your religion, your national origin, your sex, whether you have kids or a disability. 7 categories. That one's not state by state. That's the floor everywhere, and it does not bend for what a lease says either. I'll add one careful note there because I'd rather be honest than tidy. Whether that law also covers sexual orientation and gender identity at the federal level has been shifting depending on who's running things in Washington. So the steadier protection on that right now tends to come from your own state and city laws. If that's your situation, that's the kind of thing worth a real conversation with someone local, not a line in a video.
And 6, he can't just walk in. Your home is your home while you're renting it. In most states, he has to give you notice before he comes in, often 24 hours. And he can only come for a real reason, a repair, a showing, an emergency. Now, this is the one that's the patchwork. Only about half the states have an actual notice law on the books. But even in the states that don't, he still can't treat your place like it's his to wander through because you've got a right to what the law calls quiet enjoyment, a stuffy old phrase that just means the right to live in peace without your landlord letting himself in whenever he pleases. A genuine emergency, fire, a burst pipe, gas, that's different, and it should be. He can come in then. He should. So that's the 6, and I could stop there, wrap it up, tell you you're informed now, but being informed isn't the thing. I've watched too many people know all 6 of these and still lose, because knowing a rule and using a rule are separated by one phone call most folks never make. So here's what people who actually get their money or their repairs or their home back tend to do. And I mean generally, because your situation is yours and I can't see it from here. They write it down, not a text that vanishes, not a phone call nobody remembers, something in writing, dated, that says what they asked for and when, the repair request, the demand for the deposit. When you move out, you give the landlord your new address in writing, because in several states, his clock doesn't even start until you do, and people lose deposits over that one misstep alone. Then they go to the right door. For a deposit he won't return, that door is small court. The filing fee is usually modest, you don't need a lawyer to walk in, and if you wrongfully kept your money, you can often come out with more than you put down. For a repair he's ignoring, the door is your city or county code enforcement office. And I'll say it again because it's the most useful sentence in this whole thing. That inspector showing up does more than a year of polite emails. For discrimination, the door is HUD. You file a complaint and the clock on that is 1 year, so it's not a someday thing.
And every one of these comes with a real obstacle, because of course it does. The landlord who won't answer the phone, the one who suddenly can't find your forwarding address, the management company that says that's just our policy, like a policy outranks the law. It doesn't. The collector of excuses. You'll hit one of these. Plan on it. It doesn't mean you're wrong. It usually means you're close. Here's where I'll part ways with the usual advice one more time. Everybody says lawyer up. But for a lot of this, a deposit, a single ignored repair, a lawyer costs more than the fight is worth, and you'd be handing money to solve a problem a letter and a small claims filing solve on their own. Where I'd stop reading the internet and actually call someone is the heavy stuff. An eviction with a court date, discrimination with real damage, anything where you might lose the roof itself. That's not the moment to be your own attorney with a video and some confidence. That's the moment to find legal aid in your state. It's free if you qualify, and let someone who knows your local rules carry it. What gets me still is how much of this turns on a thing nobody does. Because right now, somewhere in your place there's probably a folder, maybe a drawer, and in it is that lease, the thick stack you signed and never opened again. The dead heater, still dead. The deposit you're owed is still sitting in someone else's account. The notice taped to the door is still taped to the door. And the phone is right there. I don't know why nobody teaches you this before you need it. They hand you the keys and the paperwork and just trust that you'll figure out which lines were ever real. Most people never do. They find out the hard way, standing on a porch with a key that won't turn, certain they signed away something they never could. You won't be standing there wondering anymore. That's the whole point of knowing which line doesn't count.